This is Caribbean News Desk. I'm Dennis Chabrol. In this edition, controversy surrounding the state of Guyana's parliament, although an election date has been announced. Will the election date impact on CXC exams in Guyana? Jamaica's government gives the opposition until April to make up its mind about supporting the Caribbean Court of Justice. Top American government officials arrive in Cuba for talks on immigration and diplomacy, and Montserrat Speaker does not support going back to the constituency voting system. Details coming up.
We are one Caribbean, one people, one nation. Facing the same destiny, so separated we are as one. Let's come together, one market economy. Caribbean is how it should be. Let's support, carry on for Caribbean unity. It takes you, it takes me for Caribbean unity.
In light of the opposition's sustained refusal to engage my government in the dialogue we anticipated, and in light of the commitment I made to you, the Guyanese people, I now move towards general elections. In the circumstances, I hereby announce that general and regional elections shall be held on Monday, the 11th of May, 2015.
Guyana's President Donald Ramotar announcing the election date in a radio and television address last evening. Speaker of the National Assembly Raphael Trotman confirmed that up to 1 p.m. Eastern Caribbean time Wednesday, Parliament was not dissolved because there was no such presidential proclamation and publication of such a decision in the official gazette. Mr. Trotman said that the prorogation of Parliament on November 10, 2014 to avoid the passage of a no-confidence motion by the opposition-controlled National Assembly is still in force.
Parliament is still in a state of prorogation and has not been dissolved, which is quite interesting. So the naming of the outside date of the 11th of May is, in my opinion, just the opening or the releasing of a safety valve to let some pressure out, and to let some pressure off, because one would have thought that the dissolution of Parliament would have necessarily followed the naming of an election date.
The Guyana Human Rights Association, or GHRA, believes that electoral advantage of not dissolving Parliament derives from being able to continue to enter into international agreements, such as a massive hydropower project and other vote-getting projects. But the House Speaker believes that now that the country is in election mode, the government is now a caretaker.
Well, I believe that the government assumes now a caretaker role only. Once elections have been named, you become a caretaker government. That is, that you are just to manage and hold the affairs of state until the new government is elected. It is presumed, even though it is never observed always, but it is presumed that you do not incur extraordinary expenses, save and except those which are needed for the management of the state. So new contracts, giving out of contracts, entering into treaties, and into new negotiations and so forth, those you're not expected to do, because you are now in a caretaker mode heading into an election.
The Human Rights Association urged the President to either dissolve Parliament at the earliest opportunity or adjust the election date to conform to the constitutional provision of 3 months. According to the association, Mr. Ramotar can also explain to the nation in a full and frank manner why he considers recall of Parliament to be an option still available to him despite being in an electoral season. Meanwhile, there are concerns about the impact that the election date of May 11 would have on the sitting of Caribbean examinations. Many public schools are used as polling stations across the country. Superintendent of Examinations at the Ministry of Education, Sauda Kadir, said that the exam date is for the entire Caribbean and cannot be changed. She said that efforts are being made to work out the logistics for the exams to be held as planned. Repeated efforts to contact the Minister of Education, Priya Manichand, and the Chief Education Officer, Olato Sam, were unsuccessful. Jamaica's Parliament last evening concluded its debate on legislation that will pave the way for the Caribbean Court of Justice to become the country's final appellate court. The debate ended with the country's Prime Minister giving a date on which the final vote will be made by parliamentarians. Details in this report from Keisha Ann Slate.
Jamaican parliamentarians have wrapped up their debate in the country's House of Representatives on 3 bills that, if passed, will allow for the Caribbean Court of Justice, CCJ, to be the country's final court of appeal. Jamaica's Prime Minister Portia Simpson Miller said that on April 28, parliamentarians will vote as to whether they agree or disapprove with the move to relinquish the ties with the UK Privy Council and take on the CCJ as its final court of appeal. Prime Minister Portia Simpson Miller, in closing, said that the time was being afforded the Jamaica opposition, Jamaica Labour Party, to reconsider its position for the country to establish its own court of appeal.
The opposition is now being given 3 months to reflect collectively and individually and to do the honourable and logical thing.
She reminded the opposition that past Prime Minister and former leader of the Jamaica Labour Party, Edward Siaga, had said that the matter of the CCJ was one of urgency.
The positions taken by the opposition over these years have shown great inconsistency. If they are to be honest with themselves, they would agree that this inconsistency on such a fundamental issue is not worthy of Sir Alexander Bustamante's part.
Jamaica's Prime Minister Portia Simpson Miller. Presently, only Barbados, Guyana and Belize have made the CCJ their final court of appeal. Keisha Ann Slate reporting from Kingston, Jamaica for Caribbean News Desk.
And the leader of Jamaica's opposition Jamaica Labour Party, Andrew Holness, in his contribution to the debate on the CCJ bills, made it clear why his party was against the move towards the regional court. Mr. Holness said that Jamaica should instead move to have its own court of appeal and said that the country should not take on the CCJ as a final appellate court. As he said, there were uncertainties with the CCJ that could end up before a constitutional court.
We on this side will not support the 3 bills brought here. If you are going to look to what has happened in the past with other countries who have left the Privy Council, then clearly the weight of history is that if we leave, we should establish our own court.
Leader of the opposition Jamaica Labour Party, Mr. Holness. An international firm will soon be hired by the government of Trinidad and Tobago to carry out a comprehensive audit of facilities in the country's energy sector. The announcement was made on Tuesday by Energy Minister Kevin Ramnarine. The minister gave the update in the Senate as he explained that 12 oil leaks were recorded in 2014 by state-owned Petrotrin. He said on Power 102 FM that Petrotrin has stepped up its maintenance program of its assets.
7 of those 12 leaks were less than 1 barrel, which is a couple gallons of oil in some cases. That, to my professional recollection, based on my association with Petrotrin going back many years to a postgraduate student and so on, is something that happens on a frequent basis. Where you're running a company with some 12,000 wells on land and so on, you must expect these kind of things to happen. That, of course, is something which we are working towards moving away from. We are about to engage the services of another international consultancy to conduct a national facilities audit of the entire energy sector. We start and place a lot of emphasis on the aging infrastructure at Petrotrin.
Representatives of Cuba and the United States met in Havana Wednesday for the first official bilateral talks since last month's announcement of a historic diplomatic rapprochement between the longtime antagonists. The first day of the session will be devoted to the issue of migration. Cuba's team for the migration talks is led by the head of the Foreign Ministry's U.S. desk, Josefina Vidal, while Washington is represented by Edward Alex Lee, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs. The two held talks last July in Washington. During the previous round of discussions on migration, one of the few regular official exchanges between the two governments since diplomatic ties were severed in 1961. The U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs, Roberta Jacobson, will take charge of the delegation on Thursday as the focus shifts to the mechanics of the normalization Presidents Barack Obama and Raul Castro announced December 17. Obama said Tuesday in his State of the Union address that Congress should begin this year the process of lifting the economic embargo the United States imposed on Cuba in late 1962.
In Cuba, we are ending a policy that was long past its expiration date. When what you're doing doesn't work for 50 years, it's time to try something new. And our shift in Cuba policy has the potential to end a legacy of mistrust in our hemisphere. It removes a phony excuse for restrictions in Cuba, stands up for democratic values, and extends the hand of friendship to the Cuban people. And this year, Congress should begin the work of ending the embargo. As His Holiness Pope Francis has said, diplomacy is the work of small steps. These small steps have added up to new hope for the future in Cuba.
Jacobson visited Cuba in 2011 before assuming her current post, and this week becomes the most senior serving U.S. official in decades to set foot on the communist-ruled island. The Speaker of Montserrat's Legislative Assembly wants the large voting system to be retained. Citing the sizes of the population and the habitable area of the island, Professor Sir Howard Fergus told ZJB Radio in Montserrat that going back to the constituency system may not be the best model for that British dependency.
Some people even claim that's why they have lost. The people who argue against it contend that if you have a constituency system, that the people would prefer that because they know who their particular representative is. And that has been the custom forever. Now, I see the point they're making, except I'd like to put forward, I'd like to submit that in a population of 5,000 and a voting population of 3,000 and a space of maybe 15, 13 square miles, which is a compact where you can get from the southernmost point to the northernmost point in 25 minutes, that to argue that you're cut off from people is a non-argument.
The Speaker of Montserrat's Legislative Assembly, Professor Sir Howard Fergus. The International Monetary Fund's director for the Western Hemisphere said 2 days after the organization cut its 2015 growth forecast for Latin America that economic worries prevail across the region. In its World Economic Outlook update released Monday, the IMF forecast a growth of just 1.3% for Latin America in 2015, down 0.9 of a percentage point from the fund's previous forecast in October. The organization said it expects economic contraction in Venezuela and Argentina and growth of just 0.3% in Brazil in 2015, and it also lowered its forecast for Latin America growth in 2016 to 2.3%, down from 2.8%. The IMF said Brazil is beset by anemic economic activity and stubbornly weak private sector confidence, although it added that President Dilma Rousseff's commitment to rein in the fiscal deficit and reduce inflation should help to shore up confidence in Brazil's macroeconomic policy framework. The report offered a more optimistic assessment of North and Latin America. It said Mexico's economy is projected to expand by 3.2% this year, up from 2.1% in 2014, but lower than the October forecast for 3.5% growth. You've been listening to Caribbean News Desk. Don't forget you can visit our website at caribnewsdesk.com or our Facebook page at facebook.com/caribnewsdesk. You can also follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/demwaves. You can also advertise across the Caribbean. Drop us a line at caribnewsdesk@gmail.com to tell us what you're interested in doing. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dennis Shabral.